So hello, I have the great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Lliane, who's a lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, South Africa. She's Artistic Director and Curator for the university's Center for Creative Arts, annual International Jamba Contemporary Dance Experience that has been going on 26 years, and founder of Flatfoot Dance Company and Flatfoot Downies. She's also here with Jabu Siphika, who's been with Flatfoot Dance Company for some time. So welcome both, and I'm really looking forward to talking with the two of you today. And I'd like you to start by telling us a little bit about yourselves and how you got into integrated dance.
Okay, so hi, thank you Yvette, thank you for making space to talk to us and for the very warm welcome that you've given us. So Flatfoot Dance Company started in 1994 at that very interesting moment of change in South Africa's history. I also stepped in at that point as a lecturer at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And the company started not as a company. One of the things that I started to be aware of was this extraordinary lack of spaces to train particularly black dancers in our country. And the decision to start really an evening program of just training. So the idea of setting up 2 nights a week of 2-hour slots where people who wanted to dance, lots of students, but what was also very surprising were people from community spaces who'd heard about the project, wanted to come and dance. And we used to just meet and literally dance for 2 hours. And this idea of just pushing skills and training and we started to enter little small competitions, or if there were platforms available, whoever was around was part of those platforms. And then in 2003 and 2005, between those 2 years, I applied to the National Arts Council for a bit of funding to do a kind of project. And I thought we wouldn't have a chance of getting money, and actually we did. We landed up getting it felt like a huge amount of that money, but now, when I think about it now, it was really a tiny piece of money. But with that little bit of money, we decided to actually make the company a professional, permanent company. And so I sort of held auditions, and everybody worked for minimal money, but it was a love. But that's where the company started to evolve as a professional company. And then in 2005, we registered as a proper PBO and an NPO as an officially registered company. But so that's a little bit of the history of the company. And what has always been important for me is that impulse to find spaces that have been forgotten and spaces where there hasn't been access is something that the company has still remained very true to. And of course, it's mediated our journey into working in disability dance. Our first work in disability dance started in 2008, where we were linked with Gerard Samuel, who at that time was living in Durban and working at a school called the Open Air School, which is a school for learners with disabilities, but quite high-functioning learners. So physical disabilities, some intellectual disabilities. And he'd started for quite a long time a project which he called Left Feet First. And we were always very supportive of the project. If there were platforms, we invited them and shared space with them. But Gerard landed up getting a permanent position at the University of Cape Town and was leaving. So he came and said to us, would Flatfoot take over the Left Feet First project? So it was a direct gift that was given to us by Gerard, and because we'd had so much connection with him, it was that first moment of the company stepping in and taking, in a school environment, working with learners with disabilities, and huge learning curves, So that was that, and then the working particularly with dancers with intellectual disabilities. Again, it comes as a gift that was given to the company in 2017. We worked with Lliane from Intradance, who has a long history of working with dancers from all sorts of backgrounds, whether they are intellectual or physical disabilities. And he'd been doing projects in the Netherlands with dancers who were living with Down syndrome. and he wanted to do a project. He managed to get some support funding and wanted to do a project in South Africa. And so this was not an arena that we'd worked into. I went and met with the Down Syndrome Association, started to kind of ask around, and before I knew it, a whole community of people started to come to us. It was really, really interesting that people, so when Adrian arrived, there were about, I don't know how many originally, Jabs, but about 10 young dancers came, that's it, came and auditioned, and of those 10, Adrian chose 4. And so I want to sort of acknowledge him, that our work in that way sort of began with him and me watching the way that he worked, learning about his methodology. Also, I think for the dancers, because it's very interactive. It's a very interactive way or process of working that we've kind of developed or are developing. And that kind of started that process with working with dancers with intellectual disabilities. And we've kept that project going. And because of that project and that community, which have been extraordinary in supporting, there's been this constant call for more spaces to open. So last year we opened up another call for another project, which we now call the Flatfoot Panther Project, which we did a call out for dancers with intellectual disabilities. And we've done a year program with them. We're going to continue working with them, mixed intellectual disabilities. And again, just an extraordinary community. We've also working with dancers who are using wheelchairs, Julia particularly. And that's been going for about 3 years.
3 years now.
Yeah, 3 years. So just that thing of opening up, you know.
Thank you. That's so rich. Jabu, your journey, a little bit about yourself and how you got into the integrated dance.
Okay, I met Lliane in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and then I was still training at Penduga by that time, and then I just fell in love with her, and then I think she fell in love with me as well, and then she proposed me to come to do the audition for the company. I did that, and then I joined the company in 2006. Yes. So for me, working with Flatfoot, it was like a gift because I was coming out from the training program of Penduga. So from there, from Penduga, straight to Flatfoot Dance Company, and ever since, I've been with the company. Working with disability people and in solution dance, for me, I'll say as well, it was a gift because I always say I want to have an adopted child who is not talking, is doing sign language, so I can learn from him or her. So it was my dream. So one day I'll have a child that is deaf, so I can learn from that child. So when we started to have disability dancers in 2008, yeah, in 2008. So for me, it was like, okay, I think now I'm just reaching my dreams slowly but surely. So yeah, it was like a wonderful thing, and then it still continue, and I'm still honored to be part of it.
I just wanted to also, I think Jabs is also leaving something out which is really, really important for Flatfoot, and that Jabu lives in KwaMashu, and Jabu has been single-handedly very, very key in accessing communities in KwaMashu with dancers or with young people with disabilities, whether they have had Down syndrome or whether they have been intellectual disabilities. Jabs is a bit of a mother to the nation, so she's also in her own life looking after a whole lot of people, and some of those people living with disabilities have found their way, thanks to Jabu, into our projects. And particularly, I'd like to mention Linda Kutle, who's joined our Panther project. And that's directly as a result of Jabu's kind of involvement in her own community. And it's really, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank her for that.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really important to note, because one of the things that we have to think about all the time is, how do we access communities? How do we find dancers? And we'll come back to that a little bit later. So thank you both. Lliane, you've worked as a choreographer, as a company director, as someone who's done outreach work, or someone who's programming in the festival. Let's talk a little bit about those different aspects of the work. So first, as a company director and a choreographer, I know that this requires working with people with different disabilities, requires approaches both to training and to choreography. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach both of those, maybe beginning with training?
Sure. So it's a really important question, and it's. I think that the first thing to note is that it's an ongoing discovery and a learning, and particularly with me, anything that I do is done in collaboration with the dancers that I work with. So the methodologies that we are beginning to create, where we think about training and we think about choreography, is only possible in a kind of environment where I work with highly skilled dancers like the Flatfoot company, like Jabu, who are themselves, in a way, choreographers and dance makers who work with. It's very hands-on, it's very tactile work. So, I mean, the first thing, so that said, I think the other thing that I wanted to say is that I'm really interested as a choreographer always in working with difference. So we've got a history in Flatfoot also of working, particularly, for example, with dancers who come from other disciplines and other ways of working. So we've worked with dancers who come from classical Indian dance training. We've worked with hip-hop dancers who do not work the way that we work, who do not have access to the way we think or speak about our own Flatfoot evolving methods. And so it's always been interesting for me to get people who come to the room with things you don't know, and to find a way to say, what do you know and what do we know, and how do we explore this connection? How do we create synergy? So for me, stepping into working with dancers living with disabilities has been a very easy step at some level, because it's really about engaging different consciousnesses, different bodies, different ways of moving, different ways of thinking. And it's about that relationship of discovery of how we think about creating ways of training that will serve the work we're making together. So, so those two things I think need to be said. And then the second, or maybe the third thing about the training, which is really important because there are very few spaces that allow for training, is that obviously the thing about disability, it's not a one size fits all. So it's a very, very, if you're working with dancers who are working on crutches, to working with dancers who have an intellectual disability, to working with someone who is in a wheelchair, all of those dancers require different ways of working. However, the common thing is that we are present in a room moving a body. What that movement looks like and what that body looks like is part of the discovery. So we've sort of started to create a partnering methodology. But so there's the partnering methodology, and we always begin our classes or our sessions where we always work in a circle. And the circle starts with, it's usually me that starts, and I'll start very much with very simple, rising and falling and opening. And no matter where you are, who you are, you can use your own body to find your way, to follow the instructions. So it's not about following the movement, but rather, how do we rise? How do we fall? And then what we start to do is we start to learn that. So there's a synergy of language. And then we start to add on, and I say to the Flatfoot dance, I say to Jabu, what do you want to add? And then Jabu, because of her experience, will add a movement. And, if it's too difficult, then we'll kind of look at each other, or we'll nod at each other, but we start to, and then, so for example, with the Down syndrome dancers who've been working with now for 8 or 9 years, we ask them to add language as well. So we collectively create a body of language, a body of dance language. And that's usually half the session. So it's a kind of warm-up, it's a kind of training, it's a kind of joint shared language. And then we have a break. And when we come back, we put ourselves into groups. So one day we might want duets, some days we might want a big group, half and half. And then we trios, and then we take that language that we all know, because it's common language. And I say, take that language, remember it, and start making it your own. So if you hate something, if you don't want to roll to the floor, cut it out, it's fine. But there's a common context of language that everybody has a knowledge about. And that gets pushed further and further. And then I do a thing where I make a joke. I say, I'm going to give you a gift. And the gift is you have to lift. Or the gift is you have to lean. Or the gift is you've got 10 walks to make a circle. So it starts to grow the choreography. And so I step back in a way, and I really am, as the outside choreographer, I am offering suggestions. You know, so it's, and then we start to put it together, and then I start to do the thing where I start to steal or borrow. So if things are really beautiful that have emerged in that workshop process from that common language we've created, we start to put it together so the group has something. And so by the end of maybe 3 hours, there is a very small choreography that everybody is doing. And it's remarkable. Of course, if we are making it for a performance, then we will spend time fixing and cleaning and changing and, you know, pushing. And that's where my job comes in, to push a bit more. But it's very much a collective process, and it's about creating that way of working. And that way of working can work with a dancer in a wheelchair, a dancer with an intellectual disability, because it is about a collective sense of understanding where we're going with the language. And as I said, relies very heavily on working with the Flatfoot dancers, who are really phenomenal in the way that they understand and can work, because it's patience, it's kindness, it's repetition, it's a sense of humor sometimes. It's also about calling it when it's not working. And some days are good, because also people have bad and good days, particularly dancers with intellectual disabilities. So some days you get a lot, some days you don't get anything. And you just have to flow and learn with that, you know. Yeah, and I think also with the dancers with Down syndrome, there's also a very tactile sense of working. So we call it the kind of 3-second. Dancer knows to go, that it's the side you're touching, that's the side that goes. And sometimes I know, like, for example, with Julia, who's a dancer who lives with CP, she has a kind of spatial dysmorphia sometimes. So sometimes it's just a reminder of where to go in space, and finding ways to add that into the choreography, you know. I don't know if I've left anything else, Jo.
No, I think you've said it all, because the most precious thing about them, as you said, sometimes you give gift, they love gift. It's the most thing that they love, because it's when they have to do their own things. So they do their own tricks and stuff, and then you have to learn it back. So yeah.
And that learning back is really important, because we're also learning to move in ways that we don't know. So it's about sharing and saying, what can you teach me as well? So it's about really putting yourself in the position of that dancer, whoever that dancer might be.
Thank you. That's very beautiful. And it gives us a real sense of the fact that you're working toward professionalism, strengthening, training, choreography. This is not whatever, anybody can do anything. This is formal kind of training, but in a mindful way that works from the body rather than the technique, which is very interesting. Jabu, I'm going to ask you to reflect a little bit about how you worked with Lliane and how that's different maybe than the experience you had in Kenya working with Ondiego and Matthew and Dance into Space.
I think for me it was a great experience working with Ondiego last year in February, because it's totally different for myself, because the age here in South Africa, working with our group, they small ages, like from 18 till 20-something age. And then in Kenya, it was an old people. So it was, it has a challenge for me because it was so scary first to approach. Like there was, what's his name? Oturu. I think he was in early 50s.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So for me to just jump in his world, like it was so like scary because for us, black people, we have that respect in age groups. So you can't just touch anyone in any way because he's disabled in this sort of way. And you are a dancer, you're dancing. So there's ways that we have to be conscious that where are you touching him, where are you touching. So it was like a challenge for me because with our kids, it's just free. It's free because they're still young. You can just show them how you feel, how they feel. And then for them, it was like totally a big shift. But still, I've learned a lot because those people from Kenya, they've got like families, they've got children. So for me, it was like a huge thing seeing Sister Pam in a wheelchair, that she's got like 2 babies. Is it two babies? And one he's more or less my age. I was like, oh wow, but you're still dancing. So it was like an eye opener that yes, even if you are disabled, but there's a person inside you that is normal. So it's just a shape of you that you born this way. You can do this and this and this, but you can do such things. And then the person inside you, it's just as normal as I am. For them, I think they found more open and comfort and playground because I don't think they've done dancing before. So when we opened this in 2017 with intro dance, for them it was a huge thing because they used to swimming and doing other sports. But with the Kenyan, I think they're taking that dancing serious because I think they've got limited things to do because it's rural areas. One, they don't have like many access. And yeah, so I think, yeah, that's how I saw the difference between here in South Africa and there in Kenya because there's limited access to do things in Kenya rather than here in South Africa. They've got like a couple of things that they can do.
So this brings us to think about some of the challenges that you face both individually and with the company in the work that you're doing. So politically, socially, economically, and practically in very specific area of this integrated dance that you're doing.
No, I'll say maybe politically, we just need the government to understand what we're doing. Yeah, we just need them to understand we're not just entertainers, but we are here to teach, to give someone a life that he never or she never experienced. So I think that for me, in political way, that's the lacking, because if we don't have funding, we can't go to those people because sometimes we have to go to them. So without funding, we cannot do those collaboration with those people. So I think, yeah, it strikes us very bad that they just not coming to us, the government, to help or to give us the funding for us to able to do what we want to do. And I think, yeah, socially, I can say in our Black community, we tend, I'll say we tend opening their space. We're not opening for them to do things because, like for us, like here in Flatfoot, I would say it's white dominated. We only have like one person who's Black. Yeah, because we have Kevin, yeah. So we have two. So I think we still have to go and out there and teach to the parents that we're here for them. They can trust us with their kids, so we can teach them some other things, because rather to take a child and go to school, and then from school he will go to at home, and then after that he's doing nothing. And most of them, they don't even go to school. They just staying at home. They don't do nothing. So I think it has to start from us, maybe, I don't know, to go out there and just teach the community about their children, which they are able people. It's just the matter of the body.
So that gives us a real sense, Jabu, of the social context in which you're doing this work and some of those complexities that you're engaging, not just in terms of dance, but also in terms of the attitudes, social attitudes. So I guess then that this work is about more than inclusion in dance. It's also about social inclusion and helping people think about how these young people can be integrated more fully into society and change the attitudes that they have maybe about a disability in the community itself. And I'm interested in how that inflects into how this work impacts citizenship. And I wonder if you'd like to reflect a little bit about that.
So these are really great and wonderful questions, and also just, picking up, in answering that, picking up a little bit on what Jabs was saying. I think it's also interesting that although we are working with dancers, we're also working with their extended families. And it's interesting that there's a lot of re-education, not only of ourselves, but also of the families and the way the families think about their daughters, brothers, who are coming into the project. And I think that there is a lot of prevailing discourse that looks at disability as a lack and as a punishment, or as something that should be hidden, as Jabs is speaking about, particularly in a cultural and race context. So, but in all of that, that idea of working in a place of abundance and not lack is both physically embodied in the work, but it's also asking people to think about themselves and the people they relate to in a different way. And it's an interesting thing, because I think that Flatfoot, some of the work that we do is community-based work. But actually we're not social workers. We are choreographers and we're dancers, and we are using dance as a medium to express our identity, our sense of self, our sense of belonging, the myriad sense of who we are as South Africans in whatever space, shape or form we arrive. And so while we understand there is a community and social work that is part of the project, this is our emphasis. And so sometimes it's quite hard, because you'll get some of the parents coming and saying, thank you for what you're doing for my child, as if, and it's a beautiful response, and it's a response of love, and it's a response, but it's not the kind of response we really want to honor too much, because really what we're doing is, it's not, yes, of course, anyone's helped. I'm helped when I work with Flatfoot. Jabu feels community when she's with us. But the real sense is that we want people to start looking at their brothers, sisters, children as artists, as potential artists who have the capacity to speak in this kind of way. And that's a lot of the shifting that has to go on in the work. And so it's sort of a tangential way of answering your question around citizenship, because to be a citizen means that, certainly if I think about the South African Constitution, part of it is the right to expression, the right to thinking about your identity in any way that you wish to, and to not face discrimination or exclusion, or not to be limited. And so part of this work is really, for me, any dance, whatever it is, whether it's the work that Flatfoot does in, at the Playhouse, on another platform, or whether it's the integrated work, we tell stories, we're storytellers. We tell stories with our bodies in order to reflect the world around us, to change the world around us, to make conscious things that we feel deeply. And so the idea is that working with bodies who are differently abled, intellectually or physically, is to allow those bodies also to speak and to tell stories. And for me, that's the ultimate notion of citizenship, is to speak and also to be heard. And so, yes, there's the social work. I always think about a choreographer like Faustin Linacula from the DRC, who always speaks. It's such a beautiful example in his own home village in the DRC. In order to do the work he needed to do, he had to build a water treatment. And he keeps going, people going, oh, you're helping the village. And of course he's helping the village, but he kept going, no, I'm helping the dance because my dancers need to drink clean water. And I think it's that relationship, it's a complex relationship between community, social identity, and art. But in order for us to make the art, we do have to deal with the social and the community. But we're not social workers, And I think that goes also what Jabs is saying about, funding. There is very, we also live in a political climate where disabilities become a politically correct tick box. It's not an integrated understanding of holistic ideas of self and being in the world. It's simply like, oh, we've addressed disability, we've addressed gender-based violence, we've addressed. And so we're also very cognizant that we're trying not to work in a frame that supports a politically correct way of allowing people to get away with doing the real work, in a way, And I think because of that, there is a little bit of funding, but it's not huge. And it is difficult because without funding the work, we can't go into the communities. We can't, Linda Kutle, for example, if he comes to work with us, he doesn't have a family who can support his transport. So it's a Flatfoot cost to get him into the sessions. And of course, and so those they're little things, but they are very key to the grander narrative of access,
Yeah, economics underpins everything, what's possible, what's not. And so it seems that you are building capacity in dancers, but also in audiences. And I'm really interested in how you develop audiences for this work, and what are the challenges of doing that?
Look, this is the work. I think there's many strategies, and the one is, of course, that it's a two-prong approach, and we try both, and I'm not sure which one is more or less successful, but the one is to openly declaim that this is access or disability work, so that people can be intrigued and can be wanting to see a different kind of way of thinking about disability. So the idea of perhaps enticing an audience through a very bold declaiming of work that deals particularly with this. So that would be the one strategy, and certainly audiences do come. The other strategy is just to make the work part of any other platform. So that there it is, this is the work that Flatfoot does, and oh, there's a dancer in a wheelchair, and oh, there's dancers with intellectual disabilities. And so audiences who would come to this work but not that work are suddenly forced to engage that, So I think both strategies have merit, and we work with both strategies. I think what was interesting for me about our recent Access Festival, where we did very clearly proclaim it as work about integration and about access and about disability, is that I was really amazed that audiences that have not historically come to that work, but have come to Flatfoot's work, started to come. And so that idea of slowly, I don't think it's a slow growing, because I think it's also, there's a concern, I think, because of the social stigma around disability, because society looks at disability within the framework of lack, people think, well, I don't want to go and watch that as an outing for dance. I don't want to have to feel sympathy and pity, and without, because that's the prevailing discourse. So how do you get people to say, how do you get audiences to say, this is not about lack, this is about the celebration of narrative, of life narratives, coming from bodies that haven't been heard before? Which is very much a case of what was happening in 1994, where black dancers' narratives hadn't been heard or hadn't been spoken. And this is another wave of finding ways to integrate voices of, so it's a difficult one, because we have to, has to be a shift, in a paradigm shift in a way, in order for it to filter through. But I certainly know, I mean, people who came to watch Flatfoot are not necessarily access. We kind of said, oh, we'll definitely come again. So I think it's a slow process of beginning to shift consciousness. And also the audiences are shifted by the dancers. The idea of going like, it's also, again, a terrible throwaway, because I didn't realize they could do so much, Who the they is very complex and problematic. But this idea of being surprised, which then starts to shift the greater paradigm of understanding. But it's a slow process, and but one we're up for, I think, huh?
Yeah. I love that moment of realization, and people realize that they're looking at a perceived disabled person in a super able-bodied space, and they kind of go, wow, that doesn't compute. I've the question around the role of festivals. So in South Africa particularly, there's been an increase of access festivals. So I'm thinking about Artability, that Unmute have been doing for some years. There's been the recent, so this is the second year of the Body Moves Festival in Benoni, and then your own Flatfoot Access Festival. So this kind of increase in this work that's creating critical mass. But I know that throughout the time of Jamba, you've also included work just as part of the program, which suggests your two-part approach to this. But I'm wondering if festivals themselves have a particular role to play in building new paradigms around inclusion.
I mean, look, there is a lot of, it's financial and it's political, but there's a lot of collapse, and it's also historically COVID, I suppose, but there's a collapse of dance companies in South Africa. The arts are not flourishing, they are floundering, and so historically there were certain companies who would have arms or wings or space for integrated work, and those companies have disintegrated, and there's a lot more freelance dancers. So I think festivals are a key space to keep artists working and keep art work alive. And the thing about a festival is that it does, audiences who might not necessarily make an effort to look for contemporary dance will come to the hype of a festival. So, it's the Jamba Festival, it's the 25th anniversary, I'm going to go, and just suddenly there on the platform is work by Joseph Tebandeka, by Unmute Dance Company, by Intradance. And so, however the situation emerges. So suddenly the idea that a festival, also curatorially, a festival is inviting excellence, isn't it? So the idea that if artists who are living and working with disabilities are coming to these festivals, curatorially someone or some bodies have made the decision that this is excellent work. And so it's also shifting what is included and excluded in platforms, So I think festivals are key.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, and maybe Jabu, you've been to some of these festivals and performed. Do you have also a sense that there's more opportunity for sharing, between the artists yourselves, even if it's just in discussions you have between events?
everyone, as Lliane said, if they will hear that, okay, it's August, it's Jomba Dance Festival, they will come and watch, even if they don't know what show that they're coming to watch, but they will come and watch, and then now they will see, oh, it's Unmute doing something, or it's Flatfoot with their dancing Down syndrome people, or it's the Kenyans. So I think this platform for us and disabled people, they are platforms that are good and platforms that are, they can be more of them so that people will see, people will come and see with what the people are doing out there. And yeah, I think if we can open more platform like Jomba and other stuffs, it will be helpful.
And also, you know, I mean, I know certainly with Jomba, I'm just thinking as Jabu was speaking, you know, the university students get access because the festival's located, interestingly enough, at a university. So students come. So once a student has gone to watch Unmute Dance Company, it becomes much easier to sit in a lecture or seminar and start to engage disability because the students have seen extraordinary work, which is about abundance, which is about power, identity, about strength, about presence on stage that is that opens up, as you said, all those notions of how we think about things. So it's also about, you know, through that student engagement, growing a critical audience as well.
Yeah, I remember I remember when you're speaking about Jomba last year when Joseph was doing the workshops with the students. Yeah. Like every student, when they came out, they were like amazed. Their eyes, they were wide open. Oh wow, the thing that he taught them, because like we always know that we as able builders, we are the people who can teach them, not that in other way around. So like our students like from varsity, they were like amazed with, oh, he can do this and this and this and this, that thing, the thing that you can't do, or the thing that you can do but you didn't know that you can do as well as a normal body. So yeah.
Yeah, and of course you also had young people who were writing reviews and having to think, how do you write reviews about this work in a professional way? And some of the conversations that they were having around choices of words and framing was also very, it was really rich and it was thoughtful and it was critical. And I thought that was also very beautiful, the developing of that critical performance writing, review writing is very important as well. And so for my last question, which is a personal one for each of you, I'd like you to give us a sense of how you feel this work has impacted you personally and whether you think it shifted your everyday realities in any way.
Yes, I will say it did, because okay, there's only like one guy who always speak about, like Lindo, because he's my neighbor, and he's like a brother to me now. He's a brother, not like a brother. He's a brother to me now, because every day I have to look after him, and then he comes to my house. Okay, Sisi, do you want me to do this for you? But for me, it's like understanding that we are equal, we are normal, we just humans in different bodies. So, and I think, especially in my community, they're taking him now serious. They're even taking him now serious, because before he was just a boy. And then people will speak skinnering about him. Why is he always going across the road? Because he knows that he's got epilepsy, he can fail, he can do this. But now they can see that he's a human. He's starting to get jobs, like small jobs for himself, washing turkeys, doing small jobs in the containers that they're selling amagwinya. And like people, they can see that he's part of them. He's a human. So for me, it's just, I'm so happy about what we're doing, that we can grow a person, and then he can go out there and see, okay, now I'm just a human as other people. Because even I'm sorry to say this in camera, but I'm not gonna mention names. Like the family doesn't even take him serious. The mother, I have to go there every day and speak to her. That Lindo Goshe, he's like, he's got everything that now you've got, but when you don't take your baby serious, so how do you expect other people to take him serious? So for me, seeing the shift in the community about him, it's not him only, but because it's the person that I'm seeing every day. So seeing that shift in the community, it's making me happy that, okay, at least we're doing our work that we want to do. Yeah, so yeah, I think I'm grateful that we've got this experience to give it to other people.
Sure. I mean, it's very humbling what Job says. I think for me, of course, it's life-changing, you know, particularly in South Africa and growing up, for me, particularly in the apartheid years, and having to do so much renegotiation of who I am and what I am, how my body as a white female South African occupies space, time, place. So I think, you know, for me, like working with Flatfoot on all levels, around race, around age, around class, around identity, has been a daily negotiation of identity, of self, of meeting people who are not self, but who can teach you and who you can learn from. So I think in that same vein and that same continuum of constant life learning has been also engaging with disability and really confronting very viscerally what it's like to not look like what is perceived as normal. And particularly I've been challenged by, for example, Julia, the dancer that we work with Down syndrome, who's with CP, who's a wheelchair user. And she's, you know, understanding because she's not capable of getting in and out of her chair. So the idea of having to think about, what is the space we're going to work in? Is there a toilet that she can use? How do we get in and out of a parking space? And that things that really, in a normative body, you just take for granted. And having this extraordinary gift of getting lessons, of learning to look at the world through a frame of someone who is not like you. And for me, it's been the continuum of that, you know, in terms of race, in terms of gender, age, class, and particularly with disability and looking, you know, Jobs talks so much about the shift around community, but also deeply personal shifts of really understanding difference at a very deep level, you know.
Thank you, Lliane. I think that intersectional approach is really important for us, all of us, and that even people that have a disability have their own prejudices around other disabilities, and also have to think about those things and learn from others. And I know that from my own experience in this project, I'm learning a huge amount, and I'm very, very humbled by the learning and from whom I'm learning as well. So thank you both very much. So is there anything that I have not asked or said that you would like to share that you think is important that we think about?
I think you've asked everything. I think, yeah, a lot is covered. It's just that we have to love them. We have to treat them as normal. We don't have to feel any sympathy for them. They are humans.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Jabu's just said, actually, and picking up on what you said, Yvette, because there is still bad behavior, there is still manipulation, there's still prejudice, and the more the situation of inclusion operates, the more you can call people on bad behavior and not say, well, I can't say that to this person because they are in a wheelchair, but to say, actually, you're behaving badly in this moment, or that's not what we asked, you know. And in a way, it becomes more and more real, that you become one body negotiating with another body. And I think that's the value of the work, and very profound, because there is prejudice and hierarchies of disability. I mean, I know within the physically disabled community, there's a huge level of prejudice against intellectual disabilities. And we found it in our work, and even within our dancers, and kind of getting really like, you know, this understanding that you should all understand, you know, it's not, but I think it's also about people grabbing spaces to exert themselves in a way, in a world where there is no space. And so we've been taught to do it by standing on, rather than by saying, come into the room with us, you know. So, yeah, I think that's it. So thank you, Yvette.
Thank you very much. This has been so rich. Thank you for taking the time, for sharing your work, your experiences, your reflections, your critical reflections, and how both of you have contributed hugely to developing the field and continue to do so. We thank you humbly for this.
Thank you.